Again, good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the third of our Worthington Cares Speaker Series. So glad you're here. I'm Nancy Sajano. I'm the Secretary of Drug Safe Worthington. And I have the honor of introducing Carol Taylor tonight, whom you've just met. Carol is currently a Deputy Director at the Franklin County Family and Children First Council. As an educator and trainer, Carol works within the community to infuse information regarding trauma, toxic stress, and resilience into all child-serving systems in the county. Originally from Central Ohio, Carol completed her undergraduate degree in math education and is currently working on her master's degree at the University of Findlay. I say Finland, I have to oversee. They're friendly too. Okay. Carol returned to Central Ohio in 2013 and joined the staff of the Family First Council with the goal of helping all people understand behavior and relationships in a different way, allowing children and adults to grow, learn, and live in healthy environments. Carol received so many accolades when she was a part of our speaker series last year that we just had to bring her back to present to you again this evening. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay. The hardest part of any presentation I do is listening to my bio. Because it always sounds way more fancy than how I feel, right? But that's okay. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I have to tell you, we have about 5 other trainers in our office, and all of them were incredibly jealous because I actually got fed. Most of the time we go to training, they don't get fed. And so they said, how do we get hooked up with these ones where you get fed? I said, well, you got to work until 8:30 at night. So there you go. So I thought that was a fair exchange. I also greatly enjoyed being here last year. It was a fantastic crowd. We had lots of great dialogue and questions. And so I was excited at the opportunity to come back and be with you again. I'm going to go at it a little bit differently this year. I think last year I had the whole PowerPoint handouts and all that fancy stuff. And this year, I love that we brought it out of the auditorium and into a little bit more intimate setting, and opted to go low maintenance and no technology. Whoa, hey, we're going to step way out on a limb here, and actually, hopefully, just have some dialogue. And so I'll open it up several times for you to ask some questions, ask me to clarify anything, any of those kind of things I'll be glad to do throughout the presentation. I'm going to give you just a little bit of a foundation to work with to start to frame some of those questions. And I asked the questions that I did before I started so that I kind of know where to guide stories and examples. If you were all parents of elementary kids, I didn't want to be talking about high school kids only, right? And if you're all high school students, I don't want to be talking about elementary. And so I'll kind of try to cover the whole range. I always find it interesting how we market this program, because we talk about trauma in its very definition and in its explanation. And I'm going to tell you that I'm going to talk very little about trauma tonight. Because first of all, it's a real downer at a dinner party. But secondly, is that really what we do, what my agency does and what I get to do, is to help people understand the brain. And how the brain develops, how the brain responds, how the brain reacts, and how the brain interacts, so that all of our relationships can be improved. That's not just with your children, that's with your spouse, that's with your coworkers, that's with your neighbors, anybody who has a brain, I hope that's all of you, will have these same responses that I'm going to talk about. And so this isn't just a kid issue, this isn't just a special needs issue, this isn't just a trauma issue, it's really just us understanding why people may be behaving in the ways that they are, and how do we begin to engage differently when we see some of those behaviors that we don't understand. So that's really where I'm headed tonight, maybe a little different lens than what you thought, but let's talk through that just a tiny bit. I'm going to do that probably mostly through story. I find that that's way more fun and you'll remember them far more than if I just rattle off a bunch of statistics and facts. So I want to start with a story that we have used pretty widely, and I think it's a great example and one that most people can relate to. So I'll ask to see just how out there this audience is. How many of you have ever willingly and knowingly gone into a haunted house? Like on purpose. Oh, we got a wild, out there, goofy group. Okay, great. I love that, because that makes the story better when there's lots of people in the room who can get this. So when people willingly and knowingly go to a haunted house, like you all understand, you're going somewhere to stand in the pitch black with things jumping out at you so that you scream, right? Like, that's intentional. Okay, so I want to talk through that process for just a little bit and help you see what happens in your brain. So as you go to a haunted house and you're standing outside and you're standing in a line and your friends and you are all kind of joking around, it's lots of fun and you're just kind of pretty lighthearted, it's all good. And you keep moving up toward the door. Whether you know it or not, the closer that you get to the door, the more your heart is beating. It's beating faster. Your blood pressure is rising. You're getting little doses of adrenaline. You're getting little doses of cortisol in your blood. All of your blood is starting to kind of move toward the internal of your body because you're now a little anxious. And in that moment, you know, you're still playing it cool, you're laughing, you're joking, but all this is going on in your body. And then you go through the door, and it shuts behind you, and you are in the pitch black. And you can't see your hand in front of your face. It doesn't matter that you went there intentionally. As soon as that happens, your brain does exactly what it was designed to do. And it says, holy cow, I'm gonna die. And so it moves all the blood to the core of your body. It dumps doses, big doses of adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream. Your heart starts to really beat fast. And you're going, okay, this is cool, I'm good. And you start walking, but nothing happens. And you're walking along and you're feeling pretty good, feeling pretty cool, but the longer that it takes, the higher the anxiety gets. And then you start walking a little slower, and then the person that you're with reaches over and touches your arm. Ah! Right? Because you're just sure that's the thing that's going to jump out and get you. And you react, and then you're like, yeah, I'm cool, I meant to do that, right? It's all good. And you keep walking, and you keep walking, and then boom, there it is, the thing jumps out, you scream, everybody laughs, it's all good. And you keep going. And you get to the other end of that haunted house. And you walk outside into the semi-daylight and lighter, right? And you're all laughing and teasing and joking, you get in the car. Here are some things I want you to know. It takes your blood and your brain and your heart 90 minutes after you've left that scene to be back to status quo normal. That's how much cortisol and adrenaline and anxiety is pumping in your body. It doesn't just go back to normal, right? It takes a while for that to happen. Second thing I want you to know about that is that when you walked in that haunted house, if I had handed you a 5-line poem on an index card, you could not have memorized it. Not because you're dumb, not because you have a learning disability, not because you forgot to take your medication, not because you're oppositional defiant, none of those things, but simply because your brain is occupied trying not to die. And the part of your brain that needs to memorize things and that needs to learn is not accessible in those moments. So your brain has thousands of parts, but 4 really distinct regions, and information that is threatening or frightening or unfamiliar in any way, shape, or form activates the low 2 parts of the brain. To learn, you got to be in the top part of the brain. And when you're scared, frightened, unsure, unfamiliar, all those kinds of things, that top part of your smart brain is offline, checked out, not needed right then. Okay. So we're like 7 minutes in and you're going, okay, lady, what is the point of this? Didn't think we were coming to talk about being in a haunted house. The experience that you have in a haunted house happened even though you went there willingly, knowingly, you knew exactly what was going to happen. It still attacks your brain. I contend, as do many, many, many researchers, that for our kids who live with lots and lots and lots of adversity, come into school buildings as if they've entered a haunted house. They walk through knowing something is going to jump out during the day and get them. They don't know what it'll be. They don't know when it'll be. But they wander those halls going, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? And their bodies are coursing with adrenaline and cortisol. And somebody simply bumps into them in the hallway, that touch of a loved one, and boom, and they react. And we as adults in schools don't have any tolerance for that. We don't allow that. That's a fight. And I get that, that's serious. I'm not saying we should just let kids brawl it out. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I am saying is that then we expect kids to learn. And the smart part of the brain isn't accessible. When kids grow up in environments where maybe they have been food insecure, where they've been housing insecure, where they've witnessed domestic violence, where they've lived with somebody with an untreated mental illness, when they've lived with someone with an untreated substance abuse issue, when they've been moved from place to place to place, when they've had a serious illness, when they've had a parent die, when they've had close relatives pass away, when they have a parent in prison, when their parents are divorced and it's an ugly divorce. Any of those kinds of things are pretty serious adversity to the brain. And when those things happen, the brain does what it's designed to do. And it begins to remember those things and protect against them with a very natural response called the fight, flight, freeze response. When we have those experiences over and over and over again, what happens is that fight, flight, freeze response gets stuck in the on position. And so everything that we see in the world becomes a threat. It becomes that thing jumping out at you in the haunted house. And so then we react with a or a I'm out of here, I'm not staying. Whether that's in the classroom, whether that's in the hallway, whether that's out the door, whether that's at home, they flee. Or they just simply freeze and shut down. And you kind of get that blank stare, like lights are on and nobody home kind of moment. Oftentimes these kids will be thought of as attention deficit, oppositional defiant, personality disorders, obsessive compulsive. All kinds of diagnoses get put on these things, and sometimes that's not at all what they are. It is trauma in the brain, right? I don't pretend that all of your children are traumatized. Don't pretend that at all. I want you to understand that's kind of the worst case scenario, right? Is kids that experience this every single day. But here's what I know about the world. There isn't a human being in the face of the planet that won't face some sort of adversity. If you are wandering around this planet, you are going to experience some level of adversity. You're going to experience a friend who hurts your feelings. You're going to experience a loss of a loved one. You're going to experience the loss of a pet. You're going to experience a move. You're going to experience something that feels unsafe and unsure. Right? It will happen. So when adversity happens, what do? We build resilience. Right? That's the uplifting part when I get to talk about it. We get to build resilience. So I think about a couple of different things and things that I wanted to share with you because this was entitled, What Does the Brain Want? Right? So when adversity comes, any kind of adversity, whether it's that everyday adversity or whether it's that kind of one-time, oops, bad time kind of thing happened, when adversity comes, let's talk about what the brain wants and on a day-to-day basis. Now I asked you before I started how many of you were parents for this purpose. I want you to remember when you were a new parent and you brought home this precious, precious little thing, right? And you were so excited until you got there and then you were kind of scared and nervous, and that's okay. My mom said she brought me home and set me in the carrier and I was so cute in my little lace outfit and blah, blah, blah. And then about 2 hours later she just stared at me and went, now what do I do? Right? And so in that moment, right, I want you to think all the way back to that. And I want you to think about kind of those first few days of having that new baby in the house. New babies are needy little beings, right? They need a whole lot of stuff because they can't do anything for themselves. So they need us for everything. So when a newborn infant is feeling something that is distressing, uncomfortable, not okay, how do they let us know? They cry. Very good. You passed the parent test. That's good. They cry. Now here's the bigger parent test. When they cry, what did you do? Pick them up. Change the diaper. Feed. Rock.
Change the diaper.
Change the diaper. Respond. Mom. What else did you do? Cry. You cried. Yeah, sometimes. Yes, I remember that moment. Sing. You guys are really smart. You're nearly neuroscientists. Because here's what you just told me in sciencey words, is that you removed the distress, and then you brought comfort, relationship, and rhythm. Now you didn't know that's what you told me, but that's what you told me, right? You immediately said, I went to them. That was the first thing out your mouth. And you changed the diaper and fed. So you removed what it was that was creating their crying. Feed and diaper. And then, my guess would be that it looked something like this. You put them up usually on that left side, and you started doing some version of this, right? Shh, 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 shh. Oh, it's okay, baby, right? You were singing, you were swaying, you were bouncing, you were dancing, you were doing some kind of goofy that brought all the skin-to-skin touch, lots of love and comfort. You swaddled them in a blanket, you kept them nice and warm, and you brought rhythm with a sway, with a pat, with a rub of the back, with noise, all kinds of things. You guys are pretty smart parents. So why is it that all of a sudden they turn about 5-ish, I find, it's around 5 or 6, and they suddenly start to behave in a way that says, I'm not okay and I need help. So it might look something like, I want that toy! Looks a little different than a cute little infant crying. I hate you! I hate living here! You need to pick up your stuff. Right? So it looks a little different. But what they're saying to us is, I'm not okay and I need help. And all of a sudden we respond like we never knew any of that. And we don't remove distress, and we don't bring rhythm and relationship and comfort. We do things like this. You need to sit down. You need to go to your room. You need to stop talking. You need to... And we get real command happy. And we can rapid fire some commands, I'm telling you as adults. Woo, it's amazing how fast we can say that stuff. And then we wonder why the brain escalates. Because no matter how old we are, all of us, from the moment of birth outside the womb to the moment of death, will find rhythm calming. And that started in the womb for every single one of us who has a brain. So if you think about your last really, really, really stressful day, I hope it wasn't today, but your last really, really stressful day, at the end of it, I'm going to guess you did something rhythmic. Maybe you stuck your head in a bag of Doritos. I've got some people out there, I love that. Maybe you saw chocolate like there was no tomorrow. Maybe you called a friend and right, you just kind of verbal vomited. Maybe you talked to your spouse. Maybe you cried. Maybe you wrote. Maybe you colored. Took a drive. Listened to music. Smoked a cigarette. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. Sorry. Edit that. I'm so sorry. I forgot where I was. Maybe you cooked. Maybe you watched TV. Maybe you read a book. Maybe you did some exercise, went for a walk, went for a run, went for a bike ride. Sat down with your spouse. Just asked for a hug. Had dialogue. All those things are really, really rhythmic. Because we will seek it. And we will seek relationship. Because we are a relational people. And we want a sense of belonging. more than anything else. And so when our kids are showing us behaviors that we may find challenging, annoying, irritating, upsetting, frustrating, all those kinds of words, the first challenge is that we have to see that behavior as a behavior that is a baby screaming, "I'm not okay, and I need help, but I don't know how to ask for it." Now, I don't know about you, I still do those behaviors sometimes. And when we can see the behavior that way, is that we go back to what we instinctively do when they were infants. And then we remove distress, and we bring comfort, relationship, and rhythm. I'll talk to the elementary parents for just a second, because I know there were some of you in the room. At an elementary level, right, that may look like, because they're still fairly young, unless they're getting toward that 4th, 5th grade level, but in those young grades of elementary, that may look like putting them on your lap in a rocking chair. That may look like taking a shorter walk. That may look like still wrapping them up in a blanket. That may look like playing with some Play-Doh together, coloring. That may look like they just need to lay down for a minute and take a breather. It may look a little different at the elementary level. But even more important, that you're present. Because they really don't have a ton of their brain developed yet. And so they're not working with near as many skills as our older kids are. We're still building their resilience. Right? And so they need us to be present even more in those ages to help guide through those big feelings that they're having. Because they don't know what to do with them. And it's teachable moments. To our middle school folks. For those kids, oftentimes it can be about take a run, take a walk together, play basketball together. It still can be about coloring. It still can be about Play-Doh, right? It may or may not look like putting them on your lap in a rocking chair. Now, they may do that. They'll never tell their friends, and that's okay. You don't either, right? That's okay. It may be about music. Music becomes really, really important oftentimes about that middle school grade. And so it may be about some music that they need to listen to calm down a little bit. Join them if you can. It may be about video games. By that time, they're pretty obsessed with some of the video games. It may still be a blanket, take a breather. It can be gum, because by that age, hopefully we're not as worried about choking on those kinds of things. Can be gum, can be mints, can be carrots. And I say that because what we will seek in like Doritos, when I joked about sticking your head in a bag of Doritos, is that what we're really seeking is intensity. And so vegetables that cause a lot of intensity in chewing work really well. So carrots, celery, those kinds of things can be great, what we call regulators, right? They're great calming kinds of tools. To our high school folks, still may look a little different. For them, it absolutely can be the walk, the run, those kinds of things. Often is music, often is drawing. They may or may not still be into coloring. There's a lot of adult coloring stuff out there now. They may be more into their own drawing. They may be more into playing more music rather than just listening to music. That's fine. Sport, if they're into a sport, can they go practice it? Can they kick the soccer ball? Can they play basketball? Still important for you to be around, but enter gently. Right? Don't disappear, but don't hover. Allow a little bit of that space. Because by high school, and it's not that they don't need you, that's not my message at all, but by high school, they've learned some of those regulating skills. They know some things that bring them some calmness and some comfort. And allowing a little bit of that space, but being close by. Any time that you see the window that you can join them in that behavior, please do. Because what happens is then you get calmed down too. Right? It doesn't mean you do your yapping yet. Notice that in none of that did I say yap. Okay? For parents, my usual statement is never miss a good opportunity to be quiet. Because as adults, our temptation is that we've got to teach the lesson right away. We can't let this teachable moment pass. Yes, we can. There's more to come, right? We don't have to teach every single lesson by the close of sun. It's good because it'd have to happen by 5 now, right? But it's that we get so obsessed with like resolution, with teaching something, with all that kind of stuff, and we just don't have to be quite that obsessed about it. It's more important that you're present and that you too are calm and that they know that you're still there. For our high school kids, oftentimes, and this is one of the hard ones for parents, is that it oftentimes has nothing to do with you helping calm them. It's peers. And that's tough because you're worried and you don't want to necessarily let them go, and yet they really aren't into you. And that's a normal part of development, right? At high school level, they should be starting to separate from you and seeking a peer group, and peers should be more important. That's a hard one for parents to handle, I know, because they still don't have their whole brain developed and they still make dumb decisions sometimes, and we want to be there to rescue it. Sometimes we got to let those peers be some of that softness and that regulation. Can they call a friend and then come and talk to you? Can they talk to the girlfriend and then come talk to you? Can they talk to the boyfriend and then come talk to you? Right? Can they listen to the love song and then come talk to you? That's tough. That's a tough one. Social media. One of the first things we want to do is pull them off social media. I'm going to tell you, you will never raise a kid's anxiety as high as you will when you pull them off social media and their phone. Right? And that's actual detectable stress in the brain. It's serious anxiety. And so while we think it's the right thing to do, I think we have to think about the outcome of it and how do we maintain that this is a distraction versus this is going to bring you great anxiety if I take it away. Think about what it would be if I took your phone tonight. It causes great stress. Like I left mine at the office the other day and drove 40 minutes out of my way to go get it. That's serious, right? So we're just as guilty. One of the things that we talk about a lot is that the best thing that happens to a dysregulated kid, that kid that's like letting you know they're not okay, they need help, the best thing that happens to that kid is a regulated adult. And the best thing that happens to a dysregulated adult, because that'll happen to you from time to time, is another regulated adult. So who's the pressure on here? Right? Pressure's on us as adults to keep ourselves calm, soothed, regulated. That doesn't mean we have to be perfect. It means that we have to try to keep ourselves as regulated as we can. One of the things that I really, when I train teachers, one of the things that I really encourage teachers to do, especially in elementary grades, is to do some of that descriptive commenting that we did as parents when they were wee little. You know, like, oh, I'm going to go get the bag ready, and then we'll get in the car, and like that kind of stuff, about how you handle stress. So how many of you, when you get stressed in front of, you know, like your kids are doing something, or you get stressed out about it, something, say, I just need to take a minute, and you walk away and go calm yourself down, and then you re-enter all calmed down. But the problem is, the kids never saw what you do. They just know you go away. And so then when they get upset, they go, I'm going to go away. But they don't know what to do when they go away. And so oftentimes, it's about us using that as the teachable moment. So you get off a phone and you're upset, or somebody stops by and you're upset, or you open a piece of mail and you're all cranked up about something. Having some of that descriptive commenting stuff going on in the background of, ooh, I didn't handle that well. You know what? I am a little bit cranked off about that. I wonder what that was all about. You know, I need a minute. And so I'm just going to stand here and I'm just going to chill out. Or, you know what? I know better than to call them back because I know that I'm mad and I'm going to say something I don't want to say. And so I think I'm going to go take a walk. You want to come with me? If you don't, that's okay. But while I'm on my walk, I'm just going to kind of think that through. Do you see what I'm saying? We teach kids so much by just talking about what we're thinking, about what's going on in our brains. Questions so far? Thoughts?
I had a question about, you said when we are constantly in adversity, we get stuck in a fight, flight, freeze, and then it's difficult to learn and things like that.
Yes.
Is it possible for children to flip the other way, as in they become very highly functional, and it's almost like they kind of do things in a very clinical manner when they are when they're in stress, and we tend to think that maybe they're fine and they're very well regulated, but
That's an interesting question.
Can you
So
repeat
without,
it, please?
yeah, I will.
Thank you. Thank you.
so I'll tell you why I asked the question.
Yeah.
Because my daughter does have anxiety. She's a highly functional kid, and she worships overachievement in others, and that's what she tries to be. But
Right.
she is an anxious kid, and there's been good reason for her to develop that kind of
Right.
personality. So she do a lot of fidgeting, a lot of things,
Mhm.
but she's.
So the original question was kind of asked about that when kids face lots of adversity, they can get stuck in kind of that fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah.
Is it possible that kids kind of get stuck in a, what was termed a really highly functional state,
Yeah.
where it's almost clinical kinds of behavior? Perfectionistic is really where I
Yes.
ended up hearing it.
Yes.
Yes. That's the easy answer. Let me give you the rest of the answer. Is that one of the things that we know from PET scans of brains is that the impact of living in a environment that has unrealistically high expectations of perfectionism has a greater negative impact on the brain than living in poverty and neglect. Ouch, right? The second thing, so I wanted to just kind of throw that in. So what we may see is it looks from the outside like a family's doing very well. And what's being internalized by kids is this unrealistic level of perfection, and that I have to achieve it. And it becomes such a driver that, yes, that's exactly what we see is anxiety, depression, right? We do see increased rates of substance use. We do see increased rates of suicidal tendencies, all those kinds of things. The reason behind why that happens is that when adversity happens, adversity hits the brain low, okay? So it hits down in those areas that are responsible for survival, and it hits the brain in areas that are responsible for movement. Those are the two primary areas that get affected. To cope with adversity, we need somebody's upper brain, their cortex, to be helping manage that and helping function in that. The challenge becomes that we have to target the brain where the adversity was and heal that. So a lot of times what we'll do with kids from adversity is that we'll throw them into talk therapy. And they may not be ready for talk therapy because that's asking the smart part to deal with what happened down really low, okay? So the fact that she's fidgeting, the fact that she's doing things like that, I love to see. And in fact, I'm going to say, do that intentionally with her. She needs even more movement so that she can start to heal the places where the adversity took place. Her cortex is fine. When you say high functioning, I'm taking that as highly academic. She's very smart, she's very articulate, doing well academically, I'm assuming. So her cortex is developing fine. The problem is the foundation of the house isn't developing fine. And what will happen as she ages is that the weight of all of that becomes too great and it begins to crumble. And that's when we'll start to see some of that anxiety, some of those risks for suicide, all those kinds of things. So I want you to intentionally bring movement. Not just a fidget, but I want you to, before she sits down to do homework, go for a walk. Right? If she likes to draw or color, do that before she does homework. Perfectionism is a demon all its own, and often is the result of some adversity and some trauma. Kids have a way of internalizing a whole lot of stuff from the world and blaming themselves for it, and as a result have pretty unrealistic expectations of themselves as well. And so perfectionism is actually rooted pretty high in the brain. However, to deal with it, we got to heal below and come up. So kind of like a big gouge in the skin, has to heal from the inside out. So we're going to heal the brain the same way. So my recommendations are the same, right? Is lots of movement with you or with a trusted peer, with another trusted adult, because as we're trying to build resilience in kids of all ages, so this is to all the parents, from little bitty on up, there are 5 key things that we're trying to build. One is a sense of hope. What is a sense of, or the skill of perseverance? A connectedness to school. A connectedness to community. And self-regulation. Those are the 5 key skills that we need to teach in order to truly build resilience. So when I say connectedness to community, that does not mean you go out and throw them in every activity that you can find in the community. That's about being connected to one other caring adult in some way, shape, or form, right? So being connected to community just means I feel like I belong. So that can be an extended family member, that could be a neighbor, that could be a coach, that could be anybody, but it's about a connectedness to another human being outside of the family. A connectedness to school is a greater predictor of graduation, of lack of teen pregnancy, and lack of drug abuse than any other indicator that we've been able to find. That's fascinating to me. And how many kids do not feel connected to school? Right? And oftentimes what I find is that the group that struggles the most to feel connected to school are the kids who need it the most. Right? Oftentimes it's the special ed kids, it's the gifted kids, it's kids who are not particularly athletically inclined and are not overly academically inclined. They're kind of your average type of academic kid, maybe into music more than sports, may not even be real into music, kind of a kid that just kind of likes to be who they are. But there's a lack of connectedness to the school community. Yeah?
So what do you mean, when you say connectedness to the school, like what
Yeah.
sort of behaviors are you talking about? What sort of, like when you said community, you talked specifically about a connection to another adult that's not a family member. Like
Right. What do I mean by connectedness to school? So part of it is that I feel like I belong here. I feel like I'm wanted here by my peers and by a caring adult. Right? So, and it can be either. Right? It may not be that I like any of my 9th grade teachers, but I've got 4 really good friends here. And so I'm okay. I feel like I belong. Or it may be I don't have a lot of friends here, but I love my 7th grade English teacher, or my 7th period English teacher, right? So it's about how do I feel a part of the school. I love what some of the schools do as far as having sports teams come and watch band competition, right? Because we always have a band playing at sports competitions, but we don't flip that. And so beginning to see value in each other, beginning to celebrate peer successes, no matter what, I think is awesome. Having a variety of opportunities for kids to be involved, even though they're not academic, or even though they're not sports inclined, even if they're not musically inclined, what other kinds of activities can we get them into? So that they have a place to plug in with people who are like them, that they feel a sense of belonging. Does that get a little clear? Good. Yeah.
So do you suggest, as far as the school connectedness, having them be involved in their particular school? Or the reason I'm asking is because there's programs called Youth to Youth.
Yeah.
That's, it's peer-driven and
Yep,
it's
that's what I used to
preventative.
do. Yep.
But they also have, like Guidestones has an APG,
Mhm.
an alternative peer group that's for kids with SUD, substance use disorder.
Mhm.
So, I mean, is that considered connectedness to school also?
It can be if there's a school peer in the group. That's where it gets a little tricky. What it does is gives a sense of belonging to the community,
Okay.
right? But if there's not one other kid in that activity that goes to my school, I
Okay.
don't get to transfer that positive relationship to this environment.
Okay.
So it's a good thing, no matter what. Seriously, youth kinds of stuff is what I used to do for a living, so yay, go. And it absolutely creates community for those kids, right? Then we need to bring some of it back into the building. So can a couple of kids from that group, from the school be in that same group? So that they begin to see each other and see that we have something in common and that this is okay and let's take this back to school.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Yeah.
I actually came with a question tonight.
Nice, I love that.
Last year, one of the things that you talked about was getting parallel with
Yeah,
your child.
yeah.
And that works.
What?
But I can't remember why.
Nice, I love that. Hey, tell me again why. Yeah, so she was talking about last year, so she heard me last year, I'm sorry, trained you twice. But I talked evidently last year about being parallel. And why? Why does that work? That's an easy question for me, is when we are struggling to feel regulated, so we're having that kind of moment where we're behaving in a way that is telling other people that we have a need and we're not okay, what often is happening as young people, as adults, is that our low brain has taken charge. I've just called it the low brain here. Other words I've used for it are toddler brain, because it's that part of our brain that develops in toddlerhood. It's actually called our midbrain or our cerebellum, diencephalon. There's lots of sciencey words for it that you don't need to know. But the low brain is in charge. If we think of that part of the brain as the toddler brain, because that's when it develops, think about developmentally, how do toddlers play? They play in parallel.
Yeah.
Right? They can sit side by side for hours and be fine, but they never look at each other. There's just not a lot of this face-to-face. So it meets the brain where it is to be in parallel, right? We're just gonna be here side by side. That's the first reason. The second reason that it works is the most intimidating, threatening thing that often we do, other than actually physically hurting somebody, is intense eye contact. And for kids who have experienced lots of adversity or have a sensitive kind of stress response system, what will happen is that they misperceive lots of nonverbal cues. Like they very frequently will misperceive it. So they will see threat where there was no threat. They will perceive that somebody's upset with them when it had nothing to do with them, right? So when that's the case, when I've got a kid like that especially, can even be an adult, and I say, look at me when I'm talking to you, incredibly threatening. Even sitting here talking with you just like this, if I just keep staring right at your eyes, it's going to be incredibly intimidating to you, right? And so that's not normal. We will look away, we'll ponder off, we'll look at a paper, all those, that's very normal levels of eye contact. When we're in parallel, we can't do this, right? How many of you have ever driven with your kid in the car and all of a sudden they are just like verbal vomiting their whole entire day? Yeah, it's amazing what happens in the car. But when I think about what we know, it's exactly what kids need. We're in parallel. We can't do that whole stare down business. We can't do that whole look at me when I'm talking to you. And we're busy. We're occupied as the driver. And there's a hum. There's a rhythm, often there's music. All the conditions are right for them to start to open up. And so parallel works because it meets the brain where it is, it removes threat, and it meets it at the developmental stage that it's at. Thanks for coming with a question, that was awesome. Yeah.
Well, so, I mean, I feel like that goes against, like, at least the eye contact thing goes against all my instincts. Because
Yeah.
if they're coloring or they're drawing or they're reading a book, they're not listening to what you're saying. Like, so
That's your
it's wrong.
perception.
Right, so,
Yep. Yep, yeah, hang it, I know. So the question is, or the statement is, to be parallel and not force the whole eye contact thing feels like it goes against everything that we believe, right? Because if they're coloring or looking away, they're not listening. And my immediate response was, that's your perception. Because here's what I know, is that when kids know they've done something wrong, the last thing they want to do is look at you. And when we as adults say, look at me when I'm talking to you, let me tell you what happens in the brain. It's goofy, but what happens in the brain is they now go into this tape of just look at the eyes, just look at the eyes, just stare at him, just stare at him, because he said just look at him, just look at him. They're not hearing anything you say, right? Because now all they're thinking about is just look, just look. I can't look, I want to look away, I don't want to look at him anymore, I hate looking at him, I hate when he does this to me, right? And they just start this whole tape, right? I'm dead serious. That's where the brain goes, because it's a command in an uncomfortable feeling that they're already having, and they want to do well for you, right? And that's what I want you to hear above all else, is that they want to do well. And when they know that they've messed up, you are the last person that they want to talk to, right? And there's shame, and there's guilt, and there's embarrassment. And then when we say, look, now we've asked the brain to do exactly what it does not want to do. You'd be surprised at what people can hear and focus on when they're coloring, doodling, note-taking, playing with fidget, walking. You'd be absolutely amazed. And so it does become that check-in a little bit. So tell me what you're thinking about. Tell me how you're feeling about what I just said. Just check in. They'll tell you more than you think, right? And I know, it feels uncomfortable. Test it a couple of times, not with the life lesson, probably not the birds and the bees conversation, but test it with some things and see how they do. I think you may be surprised at how much they hear.
I had another question about something, thank you, actually.
You're welcome.
I had another question about something you said earlier when you were talking about the best thing for a deregulated kid is a regulated adult. The
Yeah.
best thing for a deregulated adult is another regulated adult.
Yep.
And so my wife and I both experience this. When one of us is angry and we're deregulated, as you phrase it, anything the other one does who's regulated comes off as condescension.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
how do you avoid those situations?
Yes.
Is it possible to avoid those situations?
Yes. There's therapy right here. That was wonderful. Uh-oh, are you the wife? No, I'm not. Oh, good. Good. Man, I thought you'd set me up big. I was like, oh, wow. I'm not going there. No, we're not doing counseling right here. So I will guarantee just about every couple in here has faced that. In fact, heard lots of giggle as you said it, right? Is when one parent is dysregulated, the other one's regulated, it kind of comes off as condescending, right? And so how can we avoid that? By choosing that as a moment to stay quiet. When I say never miss a good opportunity to be quiet, sometimes the worst thing we do when somebody's dysregulated is talk. Because to hear conversation, to engage in conversation, you need to have your cortex and or your limbic system engaged, which are your top two levels of your brain. If you're really dysregulated, if you're cranked up about something, those two parts of your brain are offline. And so when I begin to talk to you, yes, you don't hear it accurately, you misread everything I say, and then it becomes about a fight between you and I, right? Which is never the goal. And so it really is about, we don't have to settle everything in the moment. And for crying out loud, don't use the term, now calm down, honey.
Well, I guess the alternative is if I'm heated and angry and I'm like unleashing on my kid,
Yes.
my wife wants to do something. Or,
Yeah,
or vice
good.
versa. If she's that way and I'm
Good. Good. So my advice in that particular situation, you're in a heated moment with your kid especially, is without a whole lot of words, come up with a code word or two that says break, right? You're losing it. The low parts of your brain are in charge and you're acting a fool right now. And you're going to do harm to our child. And so I love you enough and I love our kid enough to say time out. And I don't know what that code word is for you. I don't know what your own indicator of that is. It may be a raised voice. It may be a phrase that comes out. It may be when you use all three names. You know, like, I know that one was the one in my house. It may be whatever that indicator is between you and your spouse, is do that ahead of time when you are calm and think that through a little bit and say, I don't want to do this. I don't want to scream and yell at our kid. And so when I feel myself do that, or you hear me start to do that, I'm going to allow you this code word and I will walk away from it. That's tough. That's maturity. And I'm asking you to do something that the low part of your brain isn't going to want to do. Right? I'm asking you to be the adult in a moment when your low brain's in charge. But I think there's a responsibility in that. Right? There's a huge responsibility in that. And it doesn't have to be long. It just means that you need to take a deep breath, however it is that you regulate. You know, is that you go get a drink of water? Is that you start to chew some gum? Is that you walk away? Is that you go for a run? Is that you just need to go and scream in a pillow? I don't know what that is. Go eat a bag of Doritos, whatever that is. For you, take charge of it and then come back and talk about it. Yeah? Oh, what? I love that. Get my attention.
Can you talk a little bit about perseverance? I'm one of the counselors here at Thomas, and sometimes I see that parents want to sort of fix everything for the kids so
Yep.
they don't suffering discomfort ever.
Yep.
And I don't know, I see that more and more, and I think that then creates later on more anxiety when kids go away to college and have other things that they have to suffer through or deal with, and they haven't been equipped early on to persevere.
Yep. So she's asked me to talk a little bit about perseverance. I would absolutely agree with you that I also see that because we don't as adults like to see our kids uncomfortable, we will like to jump in and rescue and save them from any discomfort. And I can't tell you how many times I have had staff in my office that I am pretty sure I'm the first person who's ever told them no. Because the meltdown that I get, I swear that I'm talking to like a 7-year-old, right? Don't do that to your kids, right? Like you don't want them to be the 30-year-old sitting in some supervisor's office having a 7-year-old meltdown. I would much rather that their struggle and their even potential failure and mistake happen when they are 3, 4, and 5, when it is not life or career altering. Right? So that they do gain those skills. Now, if your kids are already in middle school, high school, it's not too late, right? But we have, and these are all just my opinions, this part is not research. We have become a society who is so afraid of discomfort of any kind. Right? Every building is air conditioned, every building is heated, every car is air conditioned, crying out loud, you got heated seats, you got air conditioned seats, you got heated steering wheels now. Like we don't ever want to be uncomfortable. We got a pill for everything that will fix anything you need to. And we have come to a place where creature comforts have not become something special, they've become mandatory. And because of that, even those kinds of discomforts, our kids don't know how to deal with. I have a teacher that I've coached with who's actually teaching his middle school students how to twiddle their thumbs. Because he found out they don't know how to be bored. Right? They just don't. They whip out their phone and they entertain themselves. And they don't know how to be bored. And so they get bored in school and so they start acting up. Because it's fun. And so he's actually teaching them to twiddle their thumbs, which I thought was hysterical. But what a great regulator that you've got with you wherever you go, right? And you can do it quietly, it doesn't interrupt class, doesn't interrupt anything. You can do it wherever you are. That particular aspect isn't about perseverance, it's about helping a kid understand it's okay to feel uncomfortable, right? So if we can start to do that in small ways, we're exercising that muscle. Right, so sometimes when I'm talking with parents about perseverance, it almost becomes this like, okay, so now I'm going to like shove them out in traffic and let them figure it out. No, right? So if we haven't been good at that, and I'm not judging you, I'm asking you to take your own inventory. Is that something that you struggle with? that when you just don't like to see your kids uncomfortable. I'm gonna tell you, my mom didn't. She hated seeing me upset about things, right? Thank God she let me struggle through it. But if you know that you struggle with that, that doesn't mean jump all the way to the other extreme and then just like, oh, failed that one, sorry about your luck. It means we got to build that muscle in small, tolerable doses. So is it that they're bored for 10 minutes, right? That's doing a few curls. We woke the muscle up and said, hey, we're going to use you. And then we allow them to be uncomfortable after a conflict with a friend for a whole half an hour before we talk about it. We just did a few more curls, right? We're building that perseverance muscle. I think the other piece of it that much more actively, not the passive role of that, but much more actively that we can do is begin to move our feedback to our kids to a type of feedback that builds intrinsic motivation. So oftentimes when we give feedback, it is all external. So it'll be, wow, I really like that drawing, or you did an awesome job on that, or wow, that was an awesome goal in that game, or man, you did amazing in the basketball game. And all of that is external. It's about how we felt about how they did. And so I've started to really try to move teachers to giving different praise. And I'm going to challenge some of you as parents to think about how you give praise and moving even half of it to praise that builds intrinsic motivation. So you know that your kid has tried on something, saying, wow, it seems to me like you really worked hard on that. How do you feel about it? I noticed that you used more color in that picture than you did in your last one. You like this one better, or do you like it less? How do you feel about it? What do you like about it? And it becomes the kid evaluating what they're doing. And they become intrinsically motivated to please themselves, not just the outside world. Okay? So for a teacher, like I asked a teacher today, she got a kid who's got some perfectionism and some anxiety in her classroom. And I asked her, I said, so when she does well, is it the whole, so did I do okay? Does this paper look okay? She said, yes, that's exactly it. And I said, okay, so the next time she walks up to you with, did I do okay? Does this look okay? You say, well, it looks like you spent some time on it to me. How do you feel about it? She said, oh my God, she'll melt. Yeah, she will. Yes, she will. And that doesn't mean we don't do it. It means we're asking her to pick up the barbell and do a couple of curls. And it's going to be uncomfortable. Right? And she's going to melt in front of you. And at that point, you just say, maybe I didn't say there's anything wrong with it. I'm asking how you feel about it. And I said, and that may not happen right then. She may just need to have the temper tantrum, and it's okay. This kid's a middle schooler. It's okay for her to melt. And then when she gets it pulled back together, say, wow, you did some really good work getting yourself calmed back down there. So how are you feeling about this work? And go back into the conversation. Having the meltdown doesn't mean we never talk about it again. Does that make some sense to you, that kind of praise? It's a lot of noticing kinds of language, followed by how do you feel about it. And it's that slow process of building some of that perseverance. Yeah?
Okay, so I believe in everything you're saying, even in terms of something.
Well, be careful with that.
Well, something simple like my husband, when they were little, would just want to turn the TV right on, and I would say, just let them be bored for 10 minutes, they just need to get over it, and then they'll play. So I believe in what you're saying, but how do you reconcile what you said earlier about if they're upset, like calming them and being with them and like they're a baby and they have a need and address the need and be relational and rhythmic.
Yep.
And allowing them to just feel discomfort.
Yeah, I think that's a great clarification question, because you're right, that can be really confusing, and it sounds like I said two very different things, right? So she's asking me to kind of balance the whole allowing them to struggle a little bit with be present, help them calm down, help soothe, like we did when they were babies. Here's the big difference between the two. They're not babies, so I need for you to do it in a way that's developmentally appropriate. And so elementary, middle, or high?
Elementary.
Elementary. What grade?
They're first and third.
Okay, so by first and third grade, no question in my mind that they have some self-regulation skills, right? They've learned some. Because even when they were kids, maybe they sucked on their thumb, maybe they sucked a pacifier, maybe they learned to rock themselves to sleep, or they laid in bed a certain way and, you know, played with the blankie or whatever. That they've learned some self-regulation skills. An infant has not. So when I say go to and be with, I don't mean handle it for them. I mean be present in the regulation. So take the walk with them. Say, do you need to go lay down for a little bit? Like, if you know that's what helps your kid, I don't know what helps your kid. Is it, do you need to go run around the yard? Stand outside, that doesn't mean you run with them, and it doesn't mean you need to stop the feeling. Right? It means just be present enough to know that they are regulating and they're starting to come down. Allow the struggle, that's fine. And it's almost like what you did when they were babies, is that you allowed some of that, so as they got a little older, right, into that like 7, 8, 9 months, as they got a little older, you would let that cry go just a little bit longer. Because they were learning to do things like rock, play with their thumb, play with a blanket, and put themselves back to sleep. When they were 2 days old, the instant they cried, you were up. Right? You see the difference, how that kind of developmentally, you just keep dragging that out a little bit longer. Does that clarify it a little bit? Good. Lori's going to put the hook on me, and that's fine. I'm going to tell you most of that went nowhere near where I thought it was going to go. I had no idea what I was going to say tonight. I knew I was going to tell you about the haunted house, and there it went. And that's okay. That's fine. You guys asked some amazing questions that tell me you're really thinking that through. So I'm going to close with 2 thoughts. I have yet to meet a kid, ever, that got up in the morning and said, I think I am just going to screw with the adults in my life today. I know sometimes you feel that way. It doesn't happen, right? It just doesn't happen. What does happen is they hit points in their day where they get stressed out and they don't know how to handle things and they lose skill. And so they begin to behave in ways that I want you to now hear is, I'm needing help and I need somebody to help me navigate this, right? The second one is, I've yet to ever meet a parent who woke up and said, I think I'm going to try to mess up my kid's life today. That just doesn't happen. I truly believe that every parent I have ever met genuinely loves their children. Wants them to do well, wants them to be happy, healthy, productive parts of society. And you are doing every best decision you know how in every single moment of the day. And you know, and I know, you're going to mess some of those up. And they're still going to turn out to be happy, healthy, productive parts of society, right? Because if they have relationships, if they've got relational wealth, if they've got caring, nurturing people around them, and you have built a sense of hope and a sense of resilience, and a sense of perseverance, they can face adversity. And they will. Right? What I know is that you too reach points of stress where you run out of skill. But all of us are making the best decisions that we can in every single moment. So give yourselves a break. Find that loving, caring, nurturing person who helps build your resilience, and turn around and help build it for your kids. Because they're worth it, and so are you. Right? I can't believe that this many of you spent this hour of the night standing here listening to me. And so I can't tell you how much I appreciate it and the message that it sends, how much you love your children. And how much you invest in a school and in what's going on. Because you could have been 100 other places tonight. And I won't list those off because then you'll resent me. So what I can say from here is as you step out, know that your children want to do well. They want to do well for you. They want you to be proud of them. Go show them that you are, because I know you are. Right? Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you, Carol. Now we know why we invited her back, and we'll have her come again next time.
Now I gotta come up with a new story.
Okay, new story. Two requests for you on your way out tonight, for Drive Safely, but before you go, please fill out the feedback form, and there's a box on the table out there. And also notice that in your goodie bags, there's something called a Datura pouch. That's a pouch where you can put your unwanted prescription drugs, add water, shake it, directions are on the box, on the bag, and put it in the trash. And one of the things we know is that people who abuse prescription drugs most commonly get them from family and friends. So get them out of your house and put them in the pouch and go in the bag, in the trash. Also, there is a 24/7 drop box for prescription drugs at our police station in Worthington. So you can just go in anytime and drop them off. But it's one of the things we can do to help our community become drug safe. So thank you so much for coming. Lori, do you want to say anything? She does.
I do. I just want to add something real quickly. As far as the Datura bag goes, oh, it's all right, I can scream loud enough. As far as the Datura bag, if you don't know how to use it, I actually made a video and it's on the Worthington website. Don Taylor videotaped it, and I actually went through the steps to how to use it. It's simple, it's easy. But if you don't want to read the directions, you can watch that video. Also tonight, I'm really going to keep my fingers crossed because we ran out of batteries, so we've got it plugged in. But tonight's presentation, along with the other speaker series that we've already had, which was Javier Sanchez with Be Present, and then Chief Straight and myself were last month. That is on a YouTube channel, and if you just go to YouTube, load that up and then search Drug Safe Worthington, you will find those two videos there, and hopefully this will be up by Monday. So feel free, if somebody couldn't make it today, share this information with them. In January, we will, there you go, Steve. All right, in January, we will be at Worthington Kilbourne High School, and we're going to have Ty Sells, who is also back from last year. He is going to talk about marijuana, since you know marijuana is going to be here legally as far as medical marijuana. He's going to talk about how should you have conversations with your kids or family members about marijuana, and it's called Clearing the Air. So he's going to separate some facts, some fiction, and myth, talk about marijuana and the brain and how it affects our brain. So he'll be January 9th at Worthington Kilbourne High School.
It's a very worthwhile presentation.
Yeah, he's dynamic. Yeah, he's awesome. And then the last presentation we have is going to be February 13th. And we're going to have it at the Flats in the, I call it the Merlot building, but that would be like wine, and so I shouldn't call it that. But it's something like that. It's Merlot, thank you. I should just think of a Rolo piece of candy and put Mir in front of it. So Merlot building, and that's down at the Flats. We will be having dinner down there, and the presentation will be there as well. That's going to be Operation Street Smart. The only thing we will not be able to offer you at that event is any type of childcare, because we cannot get access to any of the gyms, and just the actual where we're going to be is not going to work. So because you would have to drop your kids up here if there's an emergency, it just isn't going to work. So we won't be able to provide any childcare in February, but we will have that. And also we're hoping to have Hidden in Plain Sight, which is where you will actually walk through what looks like a teenager's room, and you will be able, you'll have a questionnaire, and you'll be able to go through and try to figure out what could be indicators of a child is really, really interested in drugs or alcohol. So that's going to be on the 13th, again, February 13th at the Merlot building.
Where is that?
Okay, it's so if you come into the school and you drive along the football field, you will turn to the left and you're like, where am I going? And you're going to go all the way down and you'll be by the river, and you'll see this one little building there, and then there's soccer fields and a baseball field. We will make sure that on our Drug Safe Worthington website, and then in the flyers that we send out, we will have directions on there. We'll have an actual map, so you'll be able to tell where it is.
I got to tell you, mark your calendar, go to that one.
Yeah.
It is an amazing presentation.
Yeah. Awesome. Again, don't forget the feedback. That's really helpful for us. Let's give Carol another hand. Thanks for the turnout today. It was greatly appreciated. If you have any questions, feel free to stay and ask.